February 25th, 1991, the second day of the ground war in Operation Desert Storm. Somewhere over the Kuwaiti desert, an American pilot was about to accomplish something that would become legendary in military aviation history. In less than 3 hours, Captain Eric Solomonson would destroy 23 Iraqi tanks, not over the course of a war, not over weeks or months, in a single mission. To understand how extraordinary this was, consider that most fighter pilots never get a single confirmed armor kill in their entire career. Some entire squadrons don't destroy 23 tanks in a war. Solomonson did it before his fuel gauge hit empty. This is the story of that mission, the aircraft that made it possible, and the perfect storm of circumstances that created one of the most devastating displays of air power ever recorded. Before we get to the mission itself, you need to understand the A-10 Thunderbolt II, universally known as the Warthog, because this aircraft is unlike anything else that has ever flown. The A-10 was designed with a single purpose: kill tanks. Everything about its design, every engineering decision, every component serves that goal. The aircraft was literally built around its gun. The GIU-8 Avenger is a 7-barrel rotary cannon that fires 30mm rounds at up to 4,200 rounds per minute. Each round weighs about a pound. The depleted uranium penetrators can slice through tank armor like a knife through butter. When this gun fires, it produces a distinctive sound, a deep BRRT that became the soundtrack of Iraqi nightmares during the Gulf War. The recoil is so powerful that it actually slows the aircraft down in flight. Pilots have to add throttle while firing just to maintain airspeed, but the gun is only part of the story. The A-10 was designed to survive in the most hostile environment imaginable: low altitude over a battlefield, thick with anti-aircraft weapons. The cockpit sits inside a titanium bathtub, armor plating that can withstand direct hits from 23 mm anti-aircraft fire. The engines are mounted high on the rear fuselage and widely separated, so if one gets hit, the other can bring the plane home. The flight controls have multiple redundancies. The A-10 can lose an engine, half a wing, part of its tail, and still make it back to base. Stories from the Gulf War prove this wasn't just theory. A-10s came back to base with gaping holes in their fuselages, with hydraulic systems shot out, with battle damage that would have brought down any other aircraft. They landed, got patched up, and flew again the next day. But the A-10 isn't fast. With a maximum speed around 450 miles per hour, it's slow by jet fighter standards. It can't dogfight. It has no sophisticated radar. It's not sleek or elegant. Air Force leadership, dominated by fighter pilots who preferred fast jets and air superiority missions, was often ambivalent about the A-10. It was seen as an unglamorous mud mover, a plane for supporting ground troops rather than winning the air war. There were periodic attempts to retire it, to replace it with faster multi-role fighters, but the A-10 survived these attempts for one simple reason: it was too damn good at its job, and the army, whose troops the A-10 protected, loved it and fought to keep it. By 1991, the A-10 had been in service for 15 years but had never been tested in major combat. It had been designed to fight Soviet tank armies in Europe, but the Cold War was ending without that battle ever happening. Some critics questioned whether it could really survive against modern air defenses, whether its gun could penetrate modern tank armor. Desert Storm would answer those questions definitively. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990, A-10 units were among the first American forces to deploy to Saudi Arabia. By January 1991, when the air campaign began, over 140 A-10s were in the Gulf, more than any other attack aircraft type. The air campaign started on January 17, 1991. For over a month, coalition aircraft bombed Iraq, destroying air defenses, attacking strategic targets, and systematically dismantling Iraqi military capability. The A-10s participated throughout, attacking artillery positions, supply depots, and frontline fortifications. They quickly learned that Iraqi air defenses, while numerous, weren't as effective as feared. The anti-aircraft artillery and surface-to-air missiles could be evaded, suppressed, or accepted as manageable risks, and the gun proved devastatingly effective. A-10 pilots would identify a tank, roll in for an attack run, aim using the aircraft's gun sight, and fire a burst. The depleted uranium rounds would punch through the armor and ignite the ammunition or fuel inside. Iraqi tanks, mostly Soviet-made T-55s, T-62s, and T-72s, had no defense against this. The A-10s also carried Maverick missiles, air-to-ground missiles with television or infrared guidance that could be launched from several miles away. The combination of the gun for close range and Mavericks for standoff attacks made the A-10 the most effective tank killer in the coalition arsenal. By late February, the ground campaign was about to begin. Coalition forces had spent months building up in Saudi Arabia. The plan was to sweep around Iraqi defenses in a massive flanking maneuver, cutting off Iraqi forces in Kuwait and destroying the Republican Guard divisions. February 25th was the second day of the ground offensive. Coalition forces were advancing rapidly. Iraqi forces were in complete disarray, some surrendering, some retreating, some trying to fight. The roads in southern Iraq and Kuwait were filled with military vehicles trying to reposition or escape. This was the situation when Captain Eric Solomonson took off for what would become the mission of his life. Captain Eric Solomonson was 28 years old, an Air Force Academy graduate who had been flying the A-10 for several years. He wasn't a legendary ace or a famous pilot. He was a professional doing his job. But sometimes the job puts you in a position to do something extraordinary. Solomonson and his wingman took off from King Fahd International Airport in the early afternoon of February 25th. Their mission was straightforward: fly into Kuwait and southern Iraq, find Iraqi armor, destroy it. This was a typical A-10 mission, what they called armed reconnaissance and tank hunting. They were armed with a full load, 1,174 rounds of 30mm ammunition for the gun, 6 Maverick missiles, and full fuel tanks. The flight to the target area took about an hour, flying low over the desert. The weather was good, visibility was clear, and Iraqi air defenses were nearly non-existent. The Iraqi Air Force had been destroyed or had fled to Iran. Iraqi anti-aircraft defenses had been suppressed by weeks of coalition attacks. As they reached their target area in southern Iraq, near the Kuwaiti border, Solomonson and his wingman began scanning for targets. What they found exceeded their wildest expectations. Stretched out below them, along roads and across the desert, was a massive Iraqi convoy. Hundreds of vehicles, tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks, all moving south, retreating from coalition ground forces. Solomonson later described it as a target-rich environment, military speak for having so many targets that the problem isn't finding them, but deciding which to hit first. He and his wingman split up to cover different sections of the convoy. They had to work fast. Each A-10 carried enough gun ammunition for maybe 8 or 9 2-second bursts before running dry. The Maverick missiles extended their capability but required longer targeting times. Solomonson began his attack runs. The pattern was brutal and efficient. Identify a tank, roll in, line up using the gun sight, dive toward the target, fire a burst from the GRU-8, pull up. The 30mm rounds would strike the target. Most of the time, the vehicle would explode or catch fire immediately. Secondary explosions from ammunition or fuel would often follow, sending flames and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. Then he would maneuver to line up on another target and repeat, again and again and again. Each attack run lasted only seconds, but in those seconds, Solomonson had to fly the aircraft, avoid ground fire, aim accurately, fire, and pull up before hitting the ground or flying through his own explosions. The The physical and mental workload was immense. The Iraqi vehicles tried to evade. Some tanks turned and tried to drive away, their engines straining. Others stopped and tried to hide behind terrain or disabled vehicles. Iraqi soldiers bailed out and ran into the desert, but at the speed and altitude Solomonson was flying, he could cover ground faster than any tank could move. A tank trying to escape was still an easy target, and the A-10's relatively slow. Speed, a disadvantage in air-to-air combat, was an advantage here. He could slow down, circle back, precisely aim and fire. A faster jet would have had much more difficulty with precision attacks at low altitude against small moving targets. Some Iraqi vehicles fought back. Anti-aircraft machine guns and small arms fire came up at the A-10s. Tracers arced toward him. He could hear impacts on the aircraft, the sharp crack of bullets striking metal. This was real danger. The A-10 was armored, but it wasn't invincible. A lucky hit could bring it down, but the aircraft's armor and redundant systems kept it flying. This was exactly what it had been designed for, to take hits and keep fighting. After expending his gun ammunition on multiple targets, Solomonson switched to his Maverick missiles. The Maverick was a fire-and-forget weapon. He would lock the missile seeker onto a target using a small video screen in the cockpit, fire, and the missile would guide itself to the target. This allowed engagement from several miles away, beyond the range of most Iraqi anti-aircraft weapons. Solomonson methodically locked onto tanks, fired Mavericks, watched them guide to their targets and detonate, then moved to the next target. Each Maverick hit resulted in a destroyed tank. The explosions were massive, the tanks simply disintegrating under the shaped charge warheads. The mission continued for nearly 2 hours. Solomonson worked systematically through the convoy, destroying vehicle after vehicle. He had to manage fuel carefully, always keeping enough reserve to fly back to base. He had to maintain situational awareness, watching for threats, coordinating with his wingman, avoiding friendly forces. Finally, with ammunition expended and fuel running low, Solomonson broke off the attack and headed back to King Fahad. The flight back was tense. Solomonson's aircraft had taken hits. Systems were damaged, but still functioning. The A-10 was still flying, a testament to its robust design. As he approached the base, he began to mentally tally what he had accomplished. He knew he had hit many targets, had destroyed many vehicles, but the exact count would have to wait for debriefing. After landing, the aircraft was inspected. It had multiple holes from ground fire. Some systems were damaged, but the aircraft had brought its pilot home safely, just as it was designed to do. Intelligence officers began the process of confirming kills using gun camera footage, mission reports, and battle damage assessment. The A-10's gun camera had recorded each attack run, showing what the pilot was shooting at and whether it was destroyed. The count came back. 23 confirmed Iraqi tank kills. 23 tanks in a single mission in less than 3 hours. The number stunned everyone. To put it in perspective, a typical tank company has pumped tanks. Solomonson had destroyed more than an entire company by himself. How did one pilot achieve such extraordinary results? Multiple factors came together in perfect alignment. First, the aircraft itself. The A-10 was designed for exactly this mission. No other aircraft in the coalition inventory could have done what Solomonson did. An F-16 or F-15E could carry bombs and missiles, but they flew too fast to make repeated precise gun runs. A helicopter, like an Apache, could kill tanks, but was far more vulnerable to ground fire. Second, the pilot. Solomonson was superbly trained. A-10 pilots spent hundreds of hours training for close air support missions. By the time he deployed to the Gulf, he had practiced these exact tactics thousands of times. The combat mission was what he had trained for his entire career. Third, the target. The Iraqi convoy was ideal. In the open, in daylight, good visibility. The vehicles were exposed and vulnerable, not dug in or effectively camouflaged. They were moving, which made them easier to spot, and there were so many that ammunition was the only limiting factor. Fourth, the lack of effective Iraqi air defense. By February 25th, Iraqi air defenses had been almost completely suppressed. What remained were short-range anti-aircraft guns and small arms, dangerous but not effective enough to stop determined attacks. Fifth, the operational situation. Iraqi forces were in complete disarray. They were retreating. Their command and control was broken. They couldn't coordinate their defense or organize a coherent response. Individual vehicles were on their own. Sixth, aggression. Solomonson attacked aggressively, pressing his attacks despite ground fire. This kept Iraqi forces off balance and allowed him to maintain the initiative throughout the mission. The story spread quickly through the A-10 community and then more widely. Solomonson became famous within the Air Force. Though he remained characteristically modest, he gave credit to his training, his aircraft, his wingman, and the circumstances. He pointed out that he had been in the right place at the right time, but others recognized that what he had done required exceptional skill, courage, and precision. Flying at low altitude under fire for nearly 2 hours, making accurate attacks on target after target, bringing his damaged aircraft home. That wasn't just luck, that was professional excellence. Solomonson's mission wasn't unique in the sense that other A-10 pilots also had highly successful missions during Desert Storm. The A-10 force as a whole destroyed over 1,000 Iraqi tanks, over 2,000 other military vehicles, and hundreds of artillery pieces during the war. These numbers far exceeded those of any other aircraft type, but Solomonson's 23 tanks in a single mission stood out, even among the impressive A-10 statistics. It became a case study in how to employ the A-10 effectively and what the aircraft could achieve when flown by a skilled pilot against the right targets. The A-10's success in Desert Storm silenced its critics, at least temporarily. The aircraft had proven itself in combat. Only 5 A-10s were lost in combat during the entire war, a remarkably low loss rate given the dangerous nature of their missions. The success validated the close air support mission itself. When ground forces attack, they need air support that can work close to friendly forces, distinguish friend from enemy, and make precise attacks in complex tactical situations. The A-10 was uniquely capable for this mission. There's something else worth considering about what Solomonson did. Flying at low altitude under fire for nearly 2 hours, making life or death decisions every few seconds creates enormous stress. The physical workload is intense. You're constantly maneuvering the aircraft, aiming, firing, pulling G-forces. The mental workload is equally intense. You're processing information, identifying targets, making tactical decisions, maintaining situational awareness, and there's the fear, the knowledge that if you make a mistake, or if you're unlucky, you could be shot down, killed, or captured. Handling all of this requires not just skill, but mental toughness, the ability to stay calm and focused under extreme stress. Solomonson demonstrated this throughout the mission. It's also worth remembering the human cost. Each of the 23 tanks Solomonson destroyed had a crew, usually 3 or 4 men. Some died when their tanks were hit. Others may have escaped. But for them, the war was terrifying, being hunted from the air by an aircraft they couldn't effectively fight back against, watching their tanks explode around them. Many Iraqi soldiers wanted nothing to do with the war. They were following orders, caught in a conflict started by a dictator they didn't choose. Solomonson's mission was a demonstration of the technological and training imbalance between coalition and Iraqi forces. Captain Eric Solomonson continued his Air Force career after Desert Storm, eventually retiring as a colonel. He spoke occasionally about his famous mission always with humility, always emphasizing the team effort and the aircraft's capabilities rather than his own skill. But those who flew with him and those who studied his mission understood that it took exceptional performance to achieve what he did. The mission became a standard story told to every new A-10 pilot. It represents the ideal, the mission where everything works, where the pilot does everything right, where the aircraft performs flawlessly, where the results are spectacular. Most pilots will never have a mission like that, but the story inspires. It shows what's possible. It sets a standard to aspire to. The A-10 itself continues to serve. Repeated attempts to retire it have been blocked because it remains uniquely capable and because ground forces insist on keeping it. The aircraft, designed in the 1970s to fight Soviets in Europe, has instead fought in deserts and mountains against insurgents and terrorists, proving adaptable and effective. Solomonson's achievement stands as a testament to what's possible when all the elements come together, when aircraft design, pilot training, tactical situation, and execution all align perfectly. On February 25, 1991, for less than 3 hours over the Kuwaiti desert, Captain Eric Solomonson had that perfect alignment. He destroyed 23 Iraqi tanks, saved coalition lives, contributed to victory, and created a legacy that continues to inspire pilots today. That's an achievement worth celebrating and worth remembering.